Good morning, Canada. Welcome back to another episode of Question Period. Today's October 10th. Today's October 10th. Where the hell is the year going? Holy smokes. Man, welcome back. It's October 10th, and we do have another question period lined up for today. This is going to be a really good one. Lots of tensions in the House. You've got this this narrative of the prorogation. It's a weird tongue twister, right? Prorogation that could potentially happen because Jagmeet Singh is getting what he wants. They've ascended it to royal ascension, and once he gets what he wants, then he's just going to turn on Trudeau. And there's lots of different speculations, but the reality is, Mr. Speaker, we don't know until we know. And Chrystia Freeland did come out and say the other day that she is not prorogation is not on the table. She just straight up said that. So is she lying? Is she telling the truth? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. But nonetheless, it's going to be a very exciting question period. And yeah, it's they're already in the House. They're doing privilege blah, 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 right before statements by members. It does get a little heated, so we're going to take a look. In fact, the Liberal MP, Kevin Lamoureux, or whatever the hell his name is, he's already getting in some trouble by the Conservative House Speaker for, he just called Conservative rats. And then the Conservative Speaker said, you're going to have to retract that. And he's like, I'm not going to retract rats, but I'll retract tying Conservatives to rats. Because, like, it's just crazy what's going on. So welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another stream, everybody. Hope everyone's prepared. My cheeks are a little rosy. I just got out of the shower. You can see by the wet shirt here. I just got out of the shower. Also, I'm going to be munching on my breakfast here. My wife just made sourdough muffins. She just completed her sourdough bread the other day, and she made me some sourdough muffins, and I had some last night. It was phenomenal. She also made sourdough cookies. Apparently it's better for your gut. I have mentioned before that we are eventually going to be moving. I think I've mentioned it on YouTube. I've mentioned it on X for sure, that we're going to be moving towards like homesteading at some point. Probably not until after the next election, whenever that is, but at some point in the future, in the nearest future, we're going to move towards homesteading to get chickens, likely even homeschool, just have a little bit more acreage than our city lot here with the house in the backyard. And yeah, she's kind of preparing, right? She's like learning how to do that sourdough stuff, and it's getting pretty good. I see lots of people are saying yummy. Yes, absolutely. It is very delicious. So we're going to get into the stream right now, get situated here. I'd encourage everyone that's just filing in, just check to see if you're subscribed. You know, a lot of times people get recommended these videos. So subscribing does ensure that you actually get a little bit more of a chance to be notified, and smash the like button on the stream. Let's try and get a few hundred likes on the stream here as we get people filing in. And without further ado, let's switch over to what's happening on the floor.
Hey. And I'll read the letter directly, Mr. Speaker. And I quote, remember, the Conservatives are actually asking for unredacted documents to be collected and directly sent to the RCMP. The Commissioner has responded to that request. There is a significant risk that the motion could be interpreted as a circumvention of normal investigative processes and charter protections. That's not the Liberal Party saying that. It's not the Government of Canada saying that. That is the independent office of our institution, the RCMP, Mr. Speaker. And even though I've had many opportunities to question Conservatives on that issue, are they concerned about what the RCMP are saying? Not one of them, Mr. Speaker, has had the courage to actually address that issue directly, even though I have witnessed dozens and dozens and dozens of them standing up, Mr. Speaker, not one of them, because they're not concerned about issues like the Charter or our Constitution or a proper process.
He does look like a mad scientist, yeah.
They're concerned about trying to turn this into a political game in which they can score cheap political points, Mr. Speaker. To try to give the false impression that the Government of Canada, the Prime Minister, or the Minister responsible does not care about the issue is just wrong. And it cannot be substantiated, Mr. Speaker. Let's go through the actual process in terms of what actually has taken place. A number of years ago, Navdeep Bains actually appoints a chair to SDTC. That chair that was appointed was actually an advisor. She gave advice to Stephen Harper. He's a Conservative, Mr. Speaker. He gave advice to Brian Mulroney, a progressive Conservative, Mr. Speaker. You often hear about the Conservatives talking about how wonderful the late Jim Flaherty is. They might be surprised, or likely not, that she actually gave advice to the former finance minister, Conservative finance minister. So Navdeep Bains appoints her to an arm's-length organization in which we appoint 50% of that board, and the rest are appointed outside of that, Mr. Speaker. So after the appointment, a couple of years goes by, and we find out that there's issues that are taking place that should not be taking place. And as a direct result, the government, through the minister responsible, has an internal review done, Mr. Speaker. In fact, we've had 2 internal reviews done. We've had the Auditor General look at the issue. We've had hours and hours and hours of debate, Mr. Speaker, in our standing committee on the issue. And for the Conservatives now, because they want their cheap political points in this game, they are now saying, well, what's the next step? Well, let's get unredacted documents.
I think we have a point of order from the honourable member.
Thank goodness.
Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to give the translators some time to ease their ears. It's quite voluminous what we're hearing across the aisle.
I appreciate the thought for our translators, but I don't think that's really a call for order.
When stupidity meets ridiculousness. That's awesome.
Regarding the question that was asked by the member for Pierre,
Point of order.
on page 403 of Procedure and Practice of the House of Commons.
He's so dumb to listen to. We gotta give the translators some time to catch
They
up.
can be anywhere in the House or behind the curtains. If the speaker can see them, then they can be counted.
Oh my goodness. And he take out the rule book over that. This is why people don't give a crap about politics, man, because of this. It's ridiculousness.
Humorous is somewhat sad.
It's pretty funny, Kevin.
At the end of the day,
It's pretty funny, Kevin.
as more and more Canadians find out who the leader of the Conservative Party really is, I think that they will become disenchanted and disappointed because of the behavior, unethical behavior that we have witnessed on numerous occasions, the type of misinformation that is espoused, Mr. Speaker, raises legitimate concerns. And then for the member across the way to try to make a joke of a very serious issue, have the independence of the RCMP calling into question a tactic that is being used here, I find it sad, even though he sits in his corner and laughs. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day,
How is this even real?
a government that has been working on the issue to ensure that there is a high sense of accountability. And there is, in fact, going to be accountability on the issue. But what I find interesting is the strategy now of the Conservative Party is to say, ignore what the RCMP concerns are, ignore what the Auditor General, who affirms the RCMP, another independent institution, just ignore what they're saying, full steam ahead. It was interesting, the New Democratic speaker before me talked about the Afghanistan scandal with Stephen Harper. And I remember that particular scandal.
SDPY with the 5.
And it's interesting.
Saying, forward this tip to Kevin.
The
Tell him
leader
to
of the
get a
Conservative
brush
Party
and
today
STFU.
was there during that scandal.
That's funny, man.
A number of the
Thank you.
Conservatives that are there sitting across from me, Mr. Speaker, were there during that scandal when Stephen Harper refused to provide documents, Mr. Speaker, that were not clear of any redactions. Speech after speech, we hear the Conservative Party not necessarily talking about the process or the procedure that should be followed, the motion, but rather they want to talk about character assassination and list off what they believe to be scandals, Mr. Speaker. You know, I had said this before, and I've read it. I have no problem at all comparing our actions as a government to the types of decisions that were being made under Stephen Harper. And I wish that we would actually see some of the Conservatives that were there during the Harper regime stand up and provide their defense on the issue and why it is that they've had some sort of come to Jesus moment in terms of a complete road to Damascus, reversal of their positioning.
That's uncalled for.
I feel that as parliamentarians, and here's where I do agree, we have a supreme right. We have a supreme privilege that enables us to do things that other Canadians cannot do. Where I disagree is just because we have that ability does not mean that we should be using that ability. I've heard Conservative members, Mr. Speaker, talk about how Centre Block had a jail in the basement and how we've had individuals walk away from the bar here, the Gold Bar, and just drive away, implying he should have been put in jail. What a slippery slope it is, Mr. Speaker. When you feel that you can just instruct the RCMP.
Hey, who knew they had comedy in Parliament, huh?
And then you get another member saying we should have the right to put someone directly into jail.
I'm going to eat my sourdough muffin.
And they like to think that they're there to protect the individuals of our society, Mr. Speaker, of rights and freedoms. And I'll stay away from some of the other issues in which many of my colleagues have raised where the Conservatives even think about issues like the notwithstanding clause and how it's no problem to use the notwithstanding clause. Why? Because Parliament can. What a terrible attitude, Mr. Speaker, to have. You know, SDTC as an organization, as an arm's length organization, arm's length being, Mr. Speaker, that there is no political interference, it's arm's length. They're making the decisions. There's a responsibility for us to ensure that there's a sense of accountability, and we have been doing that, Mr. Speaker. That's the reason why, as I say, you've seen those internal investigations. That's the reason why we have seen it go before the Standing Committee. But to try to make some of the silly comments over the many speeches coming from the other side and how they could try to justify it because they happen to be here on the floor of the House of Commons, assertions of liberal friendly. It's all liberal. It's all this corruption. That's what they say, Mr. Speaker. And if at the end of the day you want to talk about corruption, and purely corruption as they often do, you know, let me touch what a few of them that I had written down. The anti-terrorism scandal, the Phoenix scandal. I should put the word conservative ahead of all these ones. Conservative anti-terrorism scandal, the conservative Phoenix scandal, the conservative...
Have you ever wondered why this guy doesn't talk in question period?
Interesting enough, The ETS scandal is a $400 million scandal, Mr. Speaker, and it's a more direct scandal that involves...
He's that weird guy that no one ever wants to talk to.
Look it up,
So
find out.
they found
Maybe then look at
this
the
position
reaction
for
on your own
him
behavior.
to speak at.
The Conservative F-35 scandal.
Where the house is empty.
Election scandals is in plural, more than one.
It was friggin' funny.
Calls? Remember one of the Conservative MPs walking out in leg cuffs, Mr. Speaker? Don't talk to us about scandals. Look in the mirror. This is an issue, Mr. Speaker, in which the government has been on top of. This is an issue that should actually be going to the PROC committee. It's an issue in which, at the end of the day, the government is doing a disservice to the RCMP,
I don't know. They just blame Harper.
to the Auditor General, to Canadians,
They're obsessed with him.
by just giving in to what the Conservative bullying feels that they're entitled to, Mr. Speaker.
He's yelling at himself. There's like two people in Parliament right now.
At the end of the day, I would suggest to you, needs to come to an end and given
Jordan
over
English with
to
the 5. We've investigated ourselves
that we can
and we
start
found out that
dealing
we've
with
done nothing
issues
wrong. Please
that
look
our
away.
Canadians
What a
are
joke.
having to deal with.
That sums up Canada, man.
We have had introduction of bills like the Citizenship Act, the military court, civil court, the rail and marine
And B with the
safety
two. Take the L,
legislation,
Kevin. You can't win us
online
over by
harms
boring
bill.
us.
We had
I know that's
legislation
the
introduced
liberal way
earlier
of
this
doing
morning.
things. It's so
There's a lot
annoying.
that's on the agenda, Mr. Speaker.
Liberals want
Canadians
politics to be
us
extremely
working
boring,
for
so
them,
people
not working
don't
for the
pay attention to
Conservative
what's going
Party's
on.
interest. And I'm asking members opposite to put Canadians ahead of their own political party, Mr. Speaker. There's still a full year to go. Let's maximize that and get things done for Canadians.
Questions and comments? Question, commentaire. The honourable member for,
Shout out to my wife for making those sourdough muffins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Listen intently to our honourable colleague across the way. I think this is
Those are good.
We're almost over an hour in terms of the interventions that this member has spoke on this. Mr. Speaker, I have a
That's my
simple
boy,
question
Todd.
for the colleague across the way is, if something is stolen from him, does he call the police or does he call a committee? We're talking about over $480 million, 186 conflicts of interest that the Auditor General has said and have identified with that $400 million of taxpayers' funding that is gone, given to Liberal cronies, Liberal colleagues, people within that organization. All we're saying is allow the RCMP the opportunity to read the documents, unredacted. So to you, Mr. Speaker, to our honorable, through you, to our honorable colleague, if somebody steals something from you, do you call the police or do you call a committee?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Let's get some W's down in the chat for Todd. He's got to sponsor my
Where
petition.
to start?
Sponsor the petition, Todd.
Best way to start it is read what is actually taking place today. The Conservative Party is asking through a motion to collect documents unredacted and give them to the RCMP. What do the RCMP have to say about that tactic? Quote, there is a significant risk that the motion could be interpreted as a circumvention of normal investigative processes and, please listen to this, charter protections. Now, this isn't me saying it, this is the RCMP. This is the body that you want to give the information to. My God, how much simpler can it be to understand that? I don't understand how they don't understand how simple it is, this issue, Mr. Speaker. The reason why they don't understand is because they choose not to, because they rather play political games. They don't care about Canadians. They only
Byron with the
care
2.
about the advancement
Anyone else think he looks like
of the
Shrek's cousin?
Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker.
You better not be talking about my boy Todd.
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Frankly, what I'm hearing, it's a bit like a 5-year-old telling his mother, listen, Mum, It doesn't matter if I stole a bit of money from the piggy bank because, I got, sand thrown at me by another kid. That's what it sounds like. It makes no sense. I'll remind him of something. In 2010, former Prime Minister Harper
Holy
led a very
crap.
similar battle to not give documents to this House, secret documents, on Afghan detainees. And he lost that battle. The Speaker at the time, Mr. Milligan, had asked and had reminded the government of the primacy of the House of Commons and had requested the government provide all the documents, and that's what the Speaker is saying this time as well. So why do the Liberals continue to argue that they don't have to provide the documents when the House has required them to do it? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The block's got some zingers.
It would help a great deal if members opposite would stand up and say, before they comment, I disagree with the RCMP and Canada's Auditor General with regards to the Conservative tactic. At least be honest with Canadians. Tell Canadians you disagree with the RCMP and the Auditor General, and you don't care about the Charter of Rights and the Constitution. Because if you insist on the Conservative spin, what you're doing is you're walking on individual rights and processes that have been well established, and the RCMP and the Auditor General, both independent offices, have made that very clear. If the member would like, I can share the letter with her.
Need to remind I just need to remind individuals to actually come to the chair
hilarious.
when we're talking and having this debate. Questions and comments? The owner for Fleet.
Byron with the 2. Finally, Gollum is done talking. You spoke too soon.
Mr. Chair.
Brian, sorry. You spoke too soon, Brian.
The question is, if there's wrongdoing, somebody needs to be punished. There's allegations, of course, but nothing has been proven. But to my honourable colleague, when the RCMP tells you it doesn't need the material that the Conservatives want produced, when the RCMP tells you they can't use the material that would be provided if the Conservative motion were to succeed, what should we then take from that about how best to proceed with the kind of investigation that people seem to call for?
Parliamentary Secretary, Governor.
The Conservatives got pushed into a corner, and
Simple answer.
they had no other option but to go to the police.
Our independent offices, our independent agencies to do what it is they're supposed to do. We have an RCMP agency which is recognized around the world. Second to, I would suggest to you, no other agency, Mr. Speaker, or law enforcement group. They know their stuff. They know what they're doing. I think Canadians have more confidence in the RCMP as an institution than they would have on the Conservative Party on this file at the very least. And I'm trying to be kind, Mr. Speaker, here. I would suggest to you that we let individuals do the job that they're supposed to be doing. On this issue, allow more discussion in standing committees. That's why we have standing committees, to be able to go through the documents. That's where our Auditor General has made presentation, the RCMP have made presentation. It provides all forms of opportunities to ensure accountability.
And I don't think many people have confidence
It's up
in
to
the
the
RCMP.
Conservative Party in particular, a little concerned about the Bloc, but Conservative Party in
Not anymore, at
to
least.
stop with the political games at the cost of the interests of Canadians and start looking at ways in which we can be supporting Canadians, not playing games with Canadians at a great expense.
Questions and comments? The member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Speaker. A couple clarifications and then a simple question for the member opposite. First of all, the Liberal government is pretending to care about people's charter rights, which, would be new if it was believable, but this is the government that has violated all of them. Freedom of expression, mobility rights, let's talk about the Illegal Emergency Measures Act, on and on. So that.
Ooh.
The member also alluded to the fact that there's no other...
Hey, whoa. That never gets brought up by Conservative MP. Throw some freaking W's in the chat, man. That is phenomenal. Shout out to Marilyn for actually saying that. because a lot of Conservative MPs have just ignored the fact that the Emergencies Act was illegally invoked. They don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. They're going to get called deniers by Liberals, blah, 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 blah. You know how it goes, right? Greasy game of politics. Shout out to her for actually saying that, man. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. Good job, Marilyn. You have just gained more respect from Canadians. I hope you gain more respect from me for saying that. That's phenomenal.
And that's why we have amendments and sub-amendments. Well, I have not had a chance, Mr. Speaker, to speak to this privileged debate, and I would love to do so. So those are my clarifications. My question is this. The Auditor General says there's 186 conflicts of interest with the $400 million given to people's companies. The whistleblower said there was criminality involved. If the Liberal government really believes there's nothing to see here, why won't they produce the papers?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government has cooperated and produced the papers. That's been produced, just like Brian Mulroney and other levels of government have done in the past. The issue for the Conservative Party...
No, the government's not cooperating.
There's a redaction in certain aspects of the papers. Well, that happens in government. And now the Conservatives have said, well, we're going to force those unredacted papers, and we're going to go against what the RCMP are saying. We're going to go against what the Auditor General is saying. Why? Because they want to play a political game of political cheap shots. That is the reason why. And I look forward to hearing the member's comments. And I would encourage every member in opposition, when they stand up, to start their remarks by indicating that they do not support the recommendations or the concerns that have been raised by the RCMP, the Auditor General, and then through that recognize that they do not support the Charter of Rights and our Constitution. Because if they did, they would be listening to what those independent offices have to say, Mr. Speaker. And if they're not going to listen to what those independent offices have to say, then don't try to tell me that you're supporting the Charter of Rights. I won't buy that.
Okay, it's always government employees that have the excuse of, well, that's just orders. That's just the way it is. That's just how things go. Look, dude. Look, Kevin. Look, Gollum. That's not what happens. The Prime Minister and the higher ups, because there are pretty much everybody in government is higher up than you, Kevin, has the ability to either file to redact certain information, especially the Prime Minister, under the guise of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever he wants to. That can include information that should not be redacted, but that is redacted to protect himself from, criminal prosecution, criminal charges. So no, it's not that. Yeah, sometimes in terms of national security, some things are redacted for the sake of protecting Canada. Yeah, some. Not $400 million slush fund that has been proven by whistleblowers. That's been proven. Oh, how many Randys are there? There's only one. But somehow he duplicated himself. That's proven that these liberal insiders are sending some of that $400 million of slush fund money to their own companies that are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 LTD companies, right? This is freaking insane. Are you kidding me? And he's just saying, well, that's just how it is. Get out of here. Nobody's buying that. Nobody.
Resuming debate, and I will have to interrupt the honourable member in about 8 minutes. The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A number of my constituents have contacted me regarding this issue right now. And it's important that we address this series of troubling events that have not only shaken the foundations of our parliamentary democracy, but have also revealed a disturbing pattern of corruption within the Liberal government, highlighting a consistent disregard for the principles of transparency and accountability that are the bedrock of our democratic system. In 2018, going back that far, the SNC-Lavalin scandal is not just a tale of corporate misconduct, but a glaring example of political interference at the highest levels of our government. Under the leadership of this Prime Minister, the Liberal government attempted to undermine the rule of law for political gain.
Michelle saying,
Part of this scandal lies the
how did Kevin pass the psych competence
who exerted
to be a member of
pressure on
Parliament?
then Attorney General Jody
No
Wilson
doubt.
Raybould to intervene in the criminal prosecution of
SDPY with the 5. Mel Arnold looking like a Chad.
Charges of fraud and corruption, yet the Prime Minister sought to offer them a deferred prosecution agreement.
Brian saying, let's reopen all the investigations. The We Charity, the SNC Lavalin. Let's get it going. I think we agree with that, Brian.
Justice. The fallout from this scandal was significant. It made Canada an ethical pariah in the eyes of its international peers. There are consequences, and it led to the resignation of key cabinet ministers. Wilson Raybould,
B saying,
Philpott,
wonder if Kevin enjoys taking baths with JT.
that prioritize political expediency.
Meetings in the bathtub.
Integrity. The Ethics Commissioner report was damning, concluding that the Prime Minister had indeed violated the Conflict of Interest Act by improperly pressuring the Attorney General. This is not the leadership Canadians deserve. It is our duty, as His Majesty's loyal opposition, to hold the Liberal government accountable and ensure that such abuses of power are never repeated. Next, the We Charity scandal was another example of the Liberal government's pattern of corruption. Liberals awarded a $912 million contract to We Charity to administer a government program. It was later revealed that We Charity had close ties to the Prime Minister and his family, as well as former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. The controversy led to multiple parliamentary committee investigations and significant political fallout, including Morneau's resignation. Scandal damaged the public's trust again in the Liberal government and led to the calls for greater transparency and accountability in government contracting. Next, we turn to the incident involving the Winnipeg Labs. Here, we witnessed a civil servant being called to the bar of the House for failing to produce documents. This extraordinary action highlighted the importance of parliamentary oversight and the need for civil servants to comply with requests for information. The subsequent election, unnecessarily called to thwart this initiative, further demonstrated the lengths to which some will go to avoid accountability. More recently, we've seen the case of GC Strategies, where the refusal to answer questions at committee led to the principal of the company being brought to the bar and questioned by Parliament. Despite attempts by some members,
he couldn't answer anything though because
to give this individual
his doctor said it was anxiety.
He said this had caused him. I'm sure all grifters were awaiting the outcome of that. This incident serves as a reminder that no individual organization is above the scrutiny of this House. The Auditor General revealed that the development of the ArriveCan app initially estimated to cost around $80,000, ultimately ballooned to approximately $60 million. The exact final cost remains unclear due to poor record keeping, highlighting significant issues with financial management and transparency under these Liberals. And now, we are confronted with the $400 million scandal involving a conflict of interest uncovered by the Auditor General. This scandal revolves around a now-defunct foundation responsible for distributing federal funds for green technology projects. The Auditor General's report identified 186 conflicts of interest in contracts tied to the fund, with money allegedly funneled to companies in which board members had vested interests. Mr. Speaker, you ruled that the government had clearly not fully complied with an order from the House to provide documents related to the foundation. As a result, you, Mr. Speaker, demanded the production of these documents before any other business of the House can be undertaken. This decisive action underscores the seriousness of the allegations and the need for immediate transparency. The Auditor General of Canada has found that the Prime Minister turned Sustainable Development Technologies Canada into a slush fund for Liberal insiders. The Auditor General's findings are damning. $334 million, 82% of the funding approved by the board over a 5-year period, was allocated to projects in which board members held a conflict of interest. An additional $59 million was given to projects outside the mandate of the foundation and broke contribution agreements and conflict of interest laws. The Auditor General made it clear that the blame for this scandal falls on the industry minister, who did not sufficiently monitor the contracts that were given to Liberal insiders. Where is the minister's accountability to this House? These events remind Canadians that Liberals cannot be trusted with the public purse. Ad Scam, SNC Lavalin, Winnipeg Labs, We Charity,
Dude, there's so many.
Arrive Scam, and now the SDTC Green Slush Fund. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars funneled to Liberals and their friends. Obstructing, refusing to cooperate, interference, manipulation, hallmarks of gangsters and Liberals. We are faced with a governing body that is holding on to the last shred of power, refusing to turn over the documents that you, Mr. Speaker, have instructed them to do. These events collectively paint a troubling picture of a system in need of reform. As representatives of the people, it is our duty to uphold these principles and to take decisive action when they are threatened. This is Parliament's role, and the flimsy excuse that it could violate Charter rights is nonsense. Were that the actual case, this House would lose relevance. The country is going broke, while Liberal insiders are stuffing taxpayers' funds into their pockets, and this government is doing all it can to ensure Canadians don't see that. I ask my colleagues in all parties if they really want Canadians to view their roles here as elected parliamentarians as irrelevant. If some puppet of the Department of Justice, at the request of the Prime Minister, made the parliamentarian job irrelevant, stand up and say so. No more. This is something that we have to address. I'll finish up the speech after question period, Mr. Speaker.
Nice.
The honourable member from Calgary Centre
It's a lot of friggin' scandals, man.
He will have 12 minutes and 50 seconds left on the clock when he resumes his speech. It is now time for statements by members. C'est l'heure des déclarations de députés. L'honorable député de Winnipeg.
The honourable member for Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, over the course of the past year, I've had the privilege of representing the people of Winnipeg South Centre. One of the things I appreciate most about this job is the opportunity that's presented to us to receive feedback from constituents. And the feedback I've received from those I represent in Winnipeg South Centre is loud and clear on the topic of climate change. They want action. Well, I've got good news, Mr. Speaker. The Canada carbon rebate will land in the bank accounts of Manitobans once again on October the 15th. On Tuesday, a Manitoba family of 4 will receive $300 because of that Canada carbon rebate. But there's more. Despite Conservative opposition, we have doubled the top-up for families living in rural areas, retroactive to April. So it's a double rural top-up. The best part is that because big polluters pay the most, Mr. Speaker, the vast majority of Canadians receive more back through the Canada carbon rebate, and those who pollute less save even more. It's fighting climate change, and for the first time in our history, Canada is on track to meet our climate goals. Thank you.
The honourable member from Edmonton, Wetaskiwin.
Mr. Speaker, today is World Mental Health Day, and it's my absolute pleasure to highlight the critical work of the Canadian Alliance for Mental Illness and Mental Health, or CAMI, a coalition of 18 national mental health organizations representing Canadians with lived experience with mental illness and their care providers. Each year, CAMI celebrates the champions of mental health, individuals that have made a powerful positive impact on the mental health of Canadians. Earlier today, CAMI recognized this year's 7 champions, including my good friend and colleague, the Member of Parliament for my neighbour to the north, Edmonton Riverbend.
Bravo.
These 7 extraordinary individuals have demonstrated unparalleled dedication to improving mental health and substance use care across Canada. Through their relentless efforts and innovative approaches, they've made a profound impact on the lives of countless Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I ask all of my colleagues to join me in congratulating this year's champions and offering them our heartfelt gratitude for their enduring contribution to our great country.
Hear, hear, hear.
The honourable member from Sydney, Victoria.
Guess what's happening next week in Nova Scotia? The Canada carbon rebate will be distributed to Nova Scotians and deposited into their bank accounts on October 15.
Tax for breath income.
Nova Scotia will receive $200.
Dude, we are so highly taxed.
Carbon
it's
rebate.
brutal.
But it doesn't stop there. for a family living in rural Cape Breton, like in my riding of Sydney, Victoria, their October rebate will include a double room.
One of the Randys sent me a $5 super chat here.
$288.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks to
18 scandals in 9 years, close to $1 trillion that we know of.
climate goals for the first time in Canadian history.
That's insane.
We're reducing our emissions, growing our economy, and tackling inflation, all while making life more affordable for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good job.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi Timiskaming.
No government has ever had this many scandals.
October 31st.
In Canada.
Young athletes aged 15 to 17 from all over Quebec will be taking part in the International School Sports Federation's School Olympic Games in Bahrain. There's some 60 athletes and parents here today on the Hill. And for many of them, this will be the result of countless hours of training and many sacrifices. All of this to live a unique experience. So unique it makes me jealous. These athletes will be wearing the fleur-de-lis, and they represent Quebec, and they show the colors of our country in the making. Mr. Speaker, my two boys, Jules and Léon, are athletes. And it's thanks to the Fondation Équipe Quebec, a new dream is possible for them to represent Quebec on the international stage. So I have a message for the delegation of young athletes here from Quebec. You are the trailblazers, the dream igniters. When you compete, you'll have the whole nation behind you, because you make the dream of wearing Quebec's colors possible.
All right, folks, let's get nestled in here, huh?
Medal. Thank you.
Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you smash that like button.
The Honourable Member for Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, yeah, I did pause it a little bit. Let's
Canada's
fast forward.
carbon rebate will be in your bank account once again on October 15th. Ontario families of 4 will receive $280 next week. Mr. Speaker, that's a total of $1,120 this year for Ontario and Ottawa Vanier families. The Conservatives want to let their rich friends off the hook.
It's live again.
While making the middle class pay the price. The Conservatives know that the middle class will pay when they take away carbon tax rebates. They'll pay when they take away affordable child care. And they'll pay the costs of climate change when the Conservatives do nothing to fight it. The facts are the facts. The middle class can't afford Conservative cuts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Inflation is down, interest rates are down, and our emissions are going down too. And our economy is growing, and the Canada Carbon Rebate is making life more affordable. Mr. Speaker, today the PBO released a report that clears the air for Canadians and calls out the Conservative campaign of misinformation. Big polluters pay, and more money goes back to Canadians. On October 15th, Canadians will receive their Canada Carbon Rebate, and in my home province of Ontario, a family of 4 will receive a rebate of $280 every 3 months for a total of $1,120 this year. But the Conservatives would rather rip up the rebate, ignore climate change altogether, just to help out their rich oil and gas friends. But unlike Conservatives who fan the flames of conspiracies as wildfires, hurricanes, and floods,
everything you're wearing right now, buddy,
focused on the facts on this side,
was made
like the facts in this report, like
by some source of using oil and gas.
Canadians want governments to fight climate change.
It distributed
not only protect the environment and nature,
with
but
oil
also
and
ensures
gas.
the people on our planet are protected into the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Like, what a little hypocrite. Liberals are so dumb.
The honourable member from
so dumb.
Bay, please not to take the floor unless recognized by the chair. The honourable member from Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Mr. Speaker, you have ruled that the NDP Liberals have violated a House order to turn over evidence to the police for a criminal investigation into the latest Liberal $400 million scandal, effectively obstructing justice. The Auditor General's findings that Liberal appointees at Sustainable Development Technology Canada gave nearly $400 million to their own companies with over 186 conflicts of interest, at a time when Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, and house themselves. The radical Environment Minister is directly involved in the scandal, as he was the former lobbyist for a board member's company, where he brought in $110 million for the company, a company the minister still owns shares in. The NDP Liberals' refusal to respect your ruling has paralyzed all our work to address the doubling of housing costs, food inflation, crime and chaos. While the NDP Liberals end the cover-up give proof to the police so we can get accountability for corruption and Parliament can get back to work for Canadians.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good news, bad news. First, the good news, Mr. Speaker. You know, 4 times every year, there's the carbon rebate that goes out, Mr. Speaker. Well,
yeah, and to get like $1,000,
October the 15th,
it costs you like
hundreds of dollars
6, 7, 8 grand.
households in Winnipeg North and so many other constituencies. Now the bad news, Mr. Speaker. There was a time in which the Conservatives actually supported putting a tax on carbon, but they flip-flopped on that, Mr. Speaker, and the leader of the far right today says that he is going to get rid of the carbon rebate, Mr. Speaker. That is most unfortunate because Canadians should be encouraged to participate in a positive way in regards to our environment, and giving the carbon rebate is a good thing, Mr. Speaker. They should flip-flop again, and let's get behind the carbon rebates.
The honourable member from Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner.
Thank you, Speaker. Canadians are well aware that the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, crime, or corruption. At issue is the Auditor General's findings.
Down to the wire. With the 2 saying his pee in the house.
Gave nearly
he should be.
million tax
from what I'm
to their own companies.
What I'm aware of.
186 conflicts of interest.
Michelle with a 10 saying, I am a single mom of 3 low-income rural area, and the carbon rebate doesn't dent the poverty this government put a lot of us in. Shake your heads, Liberals. We are struggling only to make you rich.
Effectively obstructing
The rich get richer.
the government's refusal to respect
Thank you for that, Michelle. Also, not necessary.
Parliament,
But
pushing
thank you.
aside all of our work to
I
address the
appreciate it.
rising costs of housing, food inflation, and the issues of crime and chaos running rampant in our streets. Time is up, Mr. Speaker. It's time for the NDP Liberals to end the cover-up and corruption and provide the documents so Parliament can get working for Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy.
The honourable member from Cypress Hill Grasslands.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Carbon taxes are up, and because of this Prime Minister's radical obsession with taxing Canadians into poverty, their costs are way up. Thankfully, time is up on his carbon taxes. We just received further confirmation.
Joe, get out of here. Go study.
Does blow a huge hole in the wallet of Canadians.
Go study for your LSAT.
Watchdog said that in Saskatchewan.
Can't wait for Kevin to be booted. Right the heck out of Parliament. He's such a toxic waste of space.
Single year, once the Prime Minister
Bet you he's on that list of SDTC Liberals. Oh, for sure.
That could be used for
sure he is. Thanks for the time, Joe.
For
Go
other
study.
essentials. And all this for what? The radical socialist environment minister publicly said that his own department doesn't even track whether or not the
whole friggin' chat and the whole channel is going to know
more than
by now. It's got to know that you're studying for your LSAT.
Since the Prime Minister refuses to do what is right, Canadians are demanding a carbon tax election. They can take comfort in knowing that Conservatives will axe the tax once and for all.
That's what I like about BC's John Rustad. He says he's going to get rid of the carbon tax in BC.
On Tuesday, October 15, the day after Thanksgiving, the residents in my constituency of Davenport will be giving thanks when they look in their bank accounts and see their quarterly Canada carbon rebate amount of $280 for a family of 4 or $140 for individuals. Canadians expect their federal government to take ambitious action on climate change, and thanks to the Canada Carbon Rebate and our climate plan, we are now on track to reach our climate goals for the first time in Canadian history. We have reduced our emissions by 8%, and Canada's 2024 National Inventory Report shows that Canada is on track to meet our emission reduction goals for 2026 and also on track for our 2030 targets. While the Conservatives are focused on empty slogans and want to rip up the carbon rebates, our government is focused on growing our economy, bringing inflation down, and making life more affordable for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby.
I rise today on World Mental Health Day to acknowledge a sobering reality. In any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians experiences mental health issues. Federal public safety employees who operate in a high-stress, unpredictable environment often work at great risk to their own mental health. That's why I tabled Bill C-357, an act aimed at creating presumptive mental health injury coverage.
Hey, if you haven't yet already,
public safety
I'd
employees.
appreciate it if you guys smash the like button.
To the long-standing call from the Union of Safety and Justice Employees to ensure that all federal public safety personnel have access to workers' compensation for mental health-related injuries. My bill seeks to rectify the current inequitable system that leaves federal government employees' benefits and entitlements dependent
And subscribe.
on the
We're
province
close to
in which they
118,000.
Public safety employees work tirelessly to keep Canadians safe. It is our duty as MPs to help keep them safe as well by passing this bill. On this World Mental Health Day, let us commit to ensuring mental health supports for all. We stand with our dedicated public safety employees.
Here, here.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Maskinongé. On Friday, October 11th, we celebrate World Egg Day. Eggs are a nutritious food produced by local farmers who are exceptional both for the quality of their production and
Yeah, they're so damn expensive.
their chosen marketing system, namely supply management. We've been waiting since June 2023 for the Senate to pass legislation to protect this supply management, and it's about time. An egg is a tasty food that can be enjoyed in many different ways. Supply management is essential to the economic vitality of our regions and to maintaining family businesses. They go hand in hand. Can anyone explain this to the few senators who don't care? There are over 200 supply managed producers on the Hill today from all over Canada, and they're asking the law to be respected and sanctioned. Let's show some respect for our producers. The Senate must deliver, and why not earliest tomorrow on World Egg Day.
And they're getting ready to start here.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland Colchester.
After 9 years of NDTP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. We've heard it 1,000 times before from Canadians in all walks of life, at the doors and in our communities. But today, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed what we've known all along, that the carbon tax has been taking more away from Canadians than what they get back through rebates. Nova Scotians are going to be paying a whopping $1,215 more after the NDP Liberal quadruples the carbon tax. For Canadians, this makes all the difference in the world. Canadians are out there, Nova Scotians are trying to put food on the table, gas in their cars, and a roof over their head, all at a time when they're worried about putting heating fuel in their homes for winter. All 10 provinces are now opposed to the crushing carbon tax. It's time for the Prime Minister to show some courage and call a carbon tax election. Will the Prime Minister call an election today?
The Honourable Member from Pickering Uxbridge.
Mr. Speaker, October 10th is World Mental Health Day, and today the Union of Safety and Justice Employees are here shedding light on the need for more robust mental health support for those
You can tell
to keep
Pam behind her
safe.
doesn't want to be there.
To correctional services workers, the U.S.
She quit, actually.
Over
She quit.
19,000 safety and justice employees across Canada.
She's not going to be running
Their
again.
exposure to traumatic events and graphic materials can have lasting impacts on them and their families. The pins we are wearing today are a symbol of the sacrifice and service these individuals make and the toll that their work has on their mental health. To all of the safety and justice workers across Canada, thank you for your service. We are committed to working together to ensure there are adequate supports put in place so you can continue your good work and take care of your mental health. Thank you.
Oral questions. Questions orales. Honorable Andrew Scheer.
After 9 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, Canada has experienced a shocking rise in anti-Semitism and an increase in hate crimes of 165%. His divisive politics, where he pits one group of Canadians against another, only makes matters worse. It also doesn't help that he takes years to list terrorist groups to the list of banned organizations, allowing them to fundraise and recruit here in Canada. This one should be easy, though. The Houthis are attacking civilian ships and innocent civilians. Our allies have already banned them. So will the government do the right thing and list this group as a terrorist organization today?
The The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, we unequivocally condemn the acts we saw in Vancouver that were launched by Sami Doon. Acts like burning the flag, chanting death to Canada, acts like denying the events of October 7th and celebrating terrorism are unacceptable in this country. With respect to Sami Doon, we heard the Minister of Public Safety reference this yesterday. We've asked for an expedited review because decisions of this importance are always made on the advice of national security agencies.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
They continue to drag their feet, Mr. Speaker, but there's been another blow to the Prime Minister's carbon tax scheme. A new report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer shows yet again that Canadians are worse off under this tax. Here's what the total bill will be when the NDP Liberals finish quadrupling this tax. It'll cost people in Ontario $1,400, $1,500 in Newfoundland, and a whopping $2,000 in Saskatchewan. Canadians are already struggling with higher costs, higher groceries, and higher mortgage rates. The last thing they need is another bill from a useless carbon tax. If the government's so sure that Canadians support the tax, why not let the people decide in a carbon tax election?
That's the best way. Put some W's in the chat for Scheer. That's the best way.
Minister,
let the people decide.
Climate change.
Mr. Speaker, let me read you the first paragraph of the PBO's report. And I quote, considering only the fiscal impact of federal fuel charge, PBO estimates that average household in each of the backstop provinces in 2030-31 will see a net gain, receiving more from the Canada carbon rebate than the total amount they paid in federal fuel charge and related GST, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition should apologize to Canadians for misleading them all these months.
Oh my goodness. Frig.
Colleagues on all sides, please, I'm going to ask you to not take the floor unless the Speaker recognizes you. The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
The minister might want to read the rest of the report. Because in the quote he cited, he focused on a very key word, only the direct costs. When you factor in all the economic costs, it costs the Canadian household $1,400. Canadians are net losers under this carbon tax scheme, and this minister knows it. So, if he's so sure that Canadians want this government to keep quadrupling the tax, why not let the people decide in a carbon tax election?
There you go, man. That's the best way. Let the people decide.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Let me read you another paragraph from the report, Mr. Speaker. Moreover, in 2030-31, for all backstop provinces, we estimate that the average household in each income quintile will see a net gain, except for average household in the highest income quintile, Mr. Speaker. You know what the Leader of the Opposition is doing? He wants to take money away from the middle class and poorer Canadians to protect his rich CEO friends. That's what he's doing, Mr. Speaker.
That's quite literally not true.
The Honourable Member from Foothills.
The Minister is trying very hard to get Canadians not to understand the details. But the details are, and the facts are, that the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed what Canadians already know. They're being robbed by a carbon tax, which is driving up the cost of groceries, of gas, and everyday essentials. In fact, a family in Prince Edward Island will pay almost $1,200 a year when the NDP Liberals quadruple the carbon tax. Canadians don't support the carbon tax. We know 10 provinces don't support the carbon tax. Will the Prime Minister listen to Canadians and call a carbon tax election?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
The member talks about the agricultural sector. Well, let's talk about the climate impacts on the agricultural sector, Mr. Speaker. Droughts in 2021 resulted in 27% decline in Canada's grain production. Over the last decade, over 200 Canadian farmers have experienced cost increases and revenue loss from climate impacts, Mr. Speaker. This member and this party never talk.
Dude, all the farmers complaining about the carbon tax.
Farmers on the price of food in Canada. They want to try and make us believe that climate change isn't happening. It is happening.
What a disingenuous representation.
Mr. Speaker.
That is blatant disinformation. That's just lying.
The Minister is either living in denial or purposely misleading Canadians, because the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report is clear. It costs Canadians more to pay the carbon tax than what they get back in rebates. But if the Minister doesn't believe me, I would encourage him to read the Parliamentary Budget Report. But in the essence of time, let me help out. Page 19 states Canadians are worse off paying the carbon tax, period. That is the fact. But again, if the minister is so confident that Canadians support this carbon tax, why are they so afraid to call a carbon tax election?
Because they know they're going to lose.
Climate change.
The member points to indirect costs, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about indirect costs. Loss of revenue of $150 million in 2023 due to flooded in farmlands across this country, Mr. Speaker. The dairy farmers, egg farmers of Canada, grain growers, Canal Council, all support our plan to fight climate change. It's time for the Conservative Party of Canada to come
No, they don't.
Mr. Speaker.
These guys are just straight up lying. How is this even allowed?
No. Order.
Oh, there's going to be immense outrage today.
L'honorable député de Salaberry-sur-Roi.
The honourable member for
Wow. I can't believe that they're just lying like this.
What we've been asking for years for the Senate to be abolished. It's an outdated institution that is completely undemocratic. We said that it was useless, but we were wrong. It's not useless, it's actively harmful. The Senate doesn't seem to care at all about the will of the people. Senators can go against it without any issue or consequences. Bill C-282 has received support from all parties in this House, but 2 unelected Liberal senators are blocking it, which is undemocratic. What are the Liberals waiting for? They should bring these senators back into line. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Monsieur le Président. Once again today, I was so pleased to be at a rally supporting supply management, today with my colleagues on the Hill. It's important to note, Mr. Speaker, that supply management was initiated by a Liberal government just over 50 years ago. Then we supported supply management. Today we support supply management. Being a dairy farmer in Prince Edward Island, I'm fully aware of the values of supply management, and I urge the Senate to pass Bill 282. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Salaberry.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Supply management is an agricultural model which will protect the future of our dairy, eggs, and poultry producers. We need to protect it. We all seem to agree.
He's coming back around. I wonder if Jagmeet's there.
Except for Senators Beam and Harder, who seem to think that they're smarter than everyone else here in this House, smarter than farmers, and smarter than the millions of our fellow citizens who elected us. They seem to think they're hot stuff, part of the global intellectual elite. When will this government bring them back into line, these 2 liberal geniuses who are blocking our democracy? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, my colleague knows very well that we stand with them to support our dairy, poultry, and egg producers. We support the supply managed sector. We will continue to support it. We have made that commitment. We will not be giving up market share. But can you imagine if there had been a conservative government in power when we were negotiating with President Trump? At the time, where would our supply managed system be today, Mr. Speaker?
Dude, farmers hate the Liberal government.
From Burnaby South.
Get this, a new study recently released shows that 94% of Canadians are worried about the high cost of groceries. And with Thanksgiving coming around the corner, they're worried that greedy CEOs are going to rip them off when they go grocery shopping. Now, I get why the Conservatives voted against our plan to lower grocery prices. Their chief strategist is a chief lobbyist for none other than Loblaws. But why did the Liberals vote against?
Doesn't his brother work for one of these grocery store companies?
Greedy CEOs rip off Canadians.
Once again, I'm just going to ask members, please, to keep their voices down so that the chair can hear the honourable member, and those who require translation also be able to hear the interpretation. The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I thought the leader of the NDP would stand up and say thank you. Thank you to the Liberal government, Mr. Speaker. We have introduced the most most comprehensive reform on competition in Canada's history. And I want to congratulate him for this contribution, Mr. Speaker. Today we'll have less concentration, we'll have more choice, and we will stabilize price in Canada. But more than that, Mr. Speaker, you should rejoice that now in Canada we have a grocery code of conduct, Mr. Speaker, that's going to help our farmers across Canada. That's going to help our small retailers. Mr. Canada, they should thank us to fight for Canadians.
Farmers across Canada don't want you, tabarnak! Sorry.
L'honorable député de Burnaby.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Galen Weston speaking.
According to the Bank of Canada, people are increasingly having to use their credit card to pay for rent and groceries. Jennifer Smith from Toronto said to Radio-Canada, "It's scary. I end up choosing to skip some credit card payments, even if it affects my credit score, if it means that I can keep my home and feed my children. That's what life is like under the Liberal government. When will the Liberals finally wake up?" The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I think the NDP leader should apologize because the only person who stood up to Galen Weston in this House is the Liberal government, Mr. Speaker. When we asked all of the grocery CEOs to come to Ottawa to explain themselves. But I think the leader of the NDP should also be pleased because not only have we improved the competition system in the country, we even included what he suggested because we know that it's hard for Canadians these days. That is why every day we are fighting hard to help Canadians with grocery prices. We will help them, and we have offered food programs for you throughout the country.
All they do is ask each other to apologize.
After 9 years, taxes up, costs up, crimes up, time's up, Canadians are fed up. Right. New PBO report, same results. Canadians pay more into the carbon tax scam than what they get back in phony rebates. An average Albertan family will pay nearly $2,000 in carbon taxes after this radical Liberal NDP government quadruples the carbon tax. That's why 10 provinces oppose the carbon tax scam. They know it's like the Prime Minister and not worth the cost. If they're so sure about this carbon tax scam, why not call a carbon tax election now so Canadians can decide to axe the tax for good?
That's right.
Look at that.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think everyone in this House and Canadians watching should take everything this finance critic says about the economy with a big grain of salt, Mr. Speaker. It is this finance critics that told us if we paused our federal taxes, people in this province could save $1,000 without telling them that they'd have to drive from the North Pole to the South Pole, Mr. Speaker, to benefit from those wonderful savings. So I think we should all be very, very careful with what he says about the economy in this House, Mr. Speaker. Yes.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
We won't take any lessons from that minister who let Jasper burn because of his incompetence. I'll send him
the National Park.
That PBO's report with some diagrams and some pictures so maybe he can understand and flip over to page 19, table 3, that clearly shows a majority of Canadians pay more into this scam than what they get back in these phony rebates. That's right. 2 million Canadians are going into a food bank in a single month. 1 in 4 Canadians are skipping meals because of their carbon tax scam. If they're so sure about this carbon tax scam, let's go to a carbon tax election now so Canadians can kick this costly carbon tax coalition to the curb for good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The Honourable Minister for Family.
Conservatives are hyped today.
Development.
Mr. Speaker, we all suffer when we see that there are folks in our community that are struggling. And there is more work to be done, which is exactly why on this side of the House we continue to fight for Canadians, to fight for high-quality childcare, to fight for the Canada Child Benefit, to fight for the environment and the carbon rebate, Mr. Speaker. But let's not kid ourselves. We know that these programs that Canadians rely on would be in danger if the Conservatives had their way.
No, we'd all be a little bit
from
richer.
Kent, Middlesex.
Today, the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed again that the carbon tax costs Canadians more than they get back in rebates. And when the NDP Liberals quadruple the carbon tax, families in Ontario will be paying more than $1,400 a year in carbon taxes. This makes everything more expensive: gas, groceries, home heating. The NDP Liberal government and their carbon tax are not worth the cost. In fact, all 10 provinces are opposed to this costly coalition's carbon tax. So will the Prime Minister give Canadians what they want and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if you read the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report of today, you will see that he further confirmed once again that 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more in the carbon rebate than they pay in the price on pollution. And Mr. Speaker, it was also clear from today's report that the economic cost of pollution is not being factored in. And that cost is $34 billion per year, Mr. Speaker. And that does not include the billions of dollars that disaster mitigation costs. Every time there's a disaster in this country, it costs Canadian taxpayers. We are there in order to take climate action.
Hear, hear. I invite the honourable member from Edmonton West, please, to keep us count.
The Liberals are
floor to
dead energy. Nothing. No enthusiasm from their side.
Kent Middlesex.
Well, once again, Liberal logic is on display and their math doesn't add up. It seems the Liberals have a hard time with basic concepts like, reality or how money works. So let me make this really simple. Table 3 on page 19 of the PBO report shows what the cost of the carbon tax is. And I can send the minister a copy. The PBO says Canadians are paying more in carbon tax and GST on top of the carbon tax than they get back in rebates. And the reality is people have less money to pay for food, fuel, and home heating. Enough is enough. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election?
Holy smokes. And she's deadpanning looking into the camera. That is impressive.
For Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Enough is enough. 300 economists have said it. They pay rich more. The rich pay more.
He's like a
class Canadians pay
Quebec action figure that learned English for the first time.
Pay more than they receive. Middle class Canadians receive more than they pay. It's that simple, Mr.
It's that simple. No. It's costing us more money than it should.
Member for Charles Saint Charles.
That's kind of funny though.
The Prime
Good job,
Minister
Dracula.
is scoffing at your authority and the authority of this House. More than $400 million in taxpayer money was handed off to Liberal buddies, and the Prime Minister is still refusing to give evidence to the RCMP. He's obstructing justice. Canadians know very well that someone with nothing to hide would be happy to cooperate with the police. So who will have the courage to rise in this House and answer why? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the member has said is false. This government has given thousands of dollars in documents in response to this motion, and the motion was very clear. It was clearly stated that it was an abuse of the power of this place, and because of that we should refer the matter to committee. We respect police authority here, so why don't the Conservatives? The honourable member. So, Mr. Speaker, if I understand correctly, the government House Leader just said that you and we are engaged in abuse of power. But I think your ruling was quite clear, and that's why Parliament's work is blocked. The Prime Minister and his government are refusing to provide documents on this $400 million taxpayer scandal. Meanwhile, there are many difficulties in Canada. People are struggling, but this government isn't doing anything because this government doesn't want to listen to your ruling. Why? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Why? Mr. Speaker, because this is not a banana republic.
I don't know.
It is not politicians who tell the RCMP what to do. On the contrary, it's the opposite. And in this case,
we're pretty close to the Republic Banana.
That it does not want these documents because it might be risky to use them and it might actually sabotage their inquiry. If these Conservatives, with their Banana Republic policies, were to insist on giving the documents, it might undermine the inquiry. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquis-Langer. Mr. Speaker, this morning, farmers came from all over to Ottawa, from Quebec, Ontario, Saskatchewan, the Northwest Territories, all over the place. They all came to show their support for Bill C-282. There were also representatives of all of the parties present, the Greens, NDP, Conservatives, Liberals. They were all there to show solidarity for this Bloc Québécois bill, which has become this entire Parliament's bill. Everyone except for Mr. Harder and Mr. Beam, two appointed senators who have decided to start a crusade against our farmers. Who is going to finally bring them into line? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, we completely agree with our colleague from the Bloc Québécois. We support the supply managed system. And we are asking the senators to show diligence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Well, there were even some senators there this morning to apologize for the Senate's behavior, as they should, because there are two senators, Harder and Beam, appointed by the Prime Minister, not elected, who are sabotaging our democratic process. These two senators care more about what big lobbyists want than what Canadians at large want. So if we don't do anything about this, we'll be letting democracy be flouted under our noses. What is the government going to do to ensure that this bill, which has been adopted by a majority of members in the House of Commons, what is it going to do to get it out of the Senate? The Honourable Minister. Thank you. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we support the supply management system. We will enable it to continue to flourish. It's important for our regions and our economy. We have been asking the senators to act diligently. We have been asking that with great vigor because the Senate should recognize that the great majority in this House wants this bill to move forward. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Senator Beam said that he cannot study this bill about supply management because in case we hadn't heard about it, there are some wars going on right now. So he and Mr. Harder, apparently two future Nobel Peace Prize laureates, well, they're going to start by fixing the problem of war, and then perhaps they'll have time to bring their superior intelligence to the matter of supply management. These people really seem to think that they're quite something. Enough is enough. Will this government tell Mr. Harder and Mr. Beam to fall into line, and will they get Bill C-282 out of the Senate now? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Liberal government supports the supply management system. We have committed to make no further concessions. We have been clearly stating that the senators should act diligently, but these are independent senators. I think the Bloc Québécois understands that concept.
Trudeau, though, has kind of controlled the Senate. He's placed a lot of Liberals in there, unfortunately.
Speaker, today the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed once again
not so new guy.
Carbon tax is costing Canadian families more than they're getting back in rebates. Once the NDP Liberals quadruple the carbon tax, as they intend to do, the average family in Ontario will pay an additional tax up to $1,400. Now, to Liberal elites, that might not sound like a lot of money. The Prime Minister could probably find $1,400 in between his couch cushions. But to the average Canadian family, that's quite a lot of money. So when are we going to get
the said it in the bathtub.
Canadians desperately deserve?
That's right. I could have found $1,400 in a faucet in the bathroom. That would have been better. Use that next time.
Let me read again, Mr. Speaker, from the Parliament Budget Officer's report. And I quote, The general consensus amongst economists is that explicit carbon pricing is the most effective approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The Conservative Party of Canada has no plan to fight climate change. The Conservative Party of Canada has no plan to adapt to the massive impacts of climate change that are costing Canadians tens of billions of dollars, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative Party of Canada has no plan for the economy. The Conservative Party of Canada has nothing to say about this conversation, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, you like to talk about civility and decorum. And in the interest of civility and decorum, I'd like to invite the Minister to Table 3. Table 3 on page 19 of the PBO report, which details the overall cost of the carbon tax. Maybe when the Environmental Minister actually reviews the report and Table 3 on page 19, he might agree with me and most other Canadians that we need a carbon tax election now. So will the Minister review the table, come back to us and say when we're going to get an election that Canadians deserve? Thank you.
That's good. He's making a name for himself.
House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Also super nerd.
Interest of clarity, I think
by
Canadians would
quoting
like
the exact
what the Conservatives
chapter.
plan to cut. And
I like
he
it.
talks about families in Ontario. Well, they refuse to talk about the Canada Child Benefit that puts thousands of dollars in the pockets of Canadian families every single year. They refuse to talk about childcare that saves Canadian families thousands of dollars every year. And when they talk about the price on pollution, Mr. Speaker, they conveniently omit the fact that Canadian families get more money back than they put in. Mr. Speaker, they want to put their hands in the pockets of Canadians and take that money away. Thank you.
Good answer.
The honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, Statistics Canada confirmed today what millions of Canadians already know. While the rich are getting richer, the most vulnerable are falling further and further behind. Today, Stats Canada reported that the gap between the 40% top earners and the 40% bottom earners grew by nearly 50%. They reported that income inequity has never been higher in our country. Wow. This government has a choice. Will they continue their agenda in causing misery across our country, or will they finally call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister.
We all want to see it.
Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, I recently got to meet with a young mom named Madeline from my community who shared with me how
Sorry, Madeline, you had the unfortunate
child benefit has been
situation of meeting with Jenna.
in these early days. The Conservatives have made their position very clear, Mr. Speaker. They would cut the Canada Child Benefit and leave the 4.3 million mums across this country, like Madeline, without the support that they need. That is what Conservative cuts look like, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, when the NDP gets to work, the results are clear. Thanks to NDP pressure, Premier Legault backtracked on his decision to not offer dental care to Quebecers. Now, the Liberals, we remember the Prime Minister's promises, more doctors, more nurses, a better working public health care system for everyone. 9 years later, 500,000 Quebecers don't have a family doctor. Broken promises from the Liberals, and people are paying the price. When will the Liberals get to work to make sure that everyone has a family doctor? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank and congratulate my colleague from the NDP from Montreal, as well as all members of the NDP, for their support for the Canada Dental Care Plan. It's made a major difference for Quebecers. There are 800,000 Quebec seniors who now have a Canada Dental Care Plan card, and 250,000 of them for the first time in many years, in many cases, have had access to affordable dental care. It's thanks to great cooperation with great results for Quebecers, even if the Conservatives claim this program doesn't exist.
Westminster Burnaby would please not take the floor unless recognized by the House. The Honourable Member from Churchill, Kiwatinuk-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, this week Canada's lawyers argued in federal court that First Nations leaders are showing a, quote, lack of maturity in their fight for clean drinking water. A lack of maturity. This language is unbelievable. It is deeply offensive, paternalistic, and discriminatory. Let's be clear, the lack of clean drinking water on reserve didn't just happen.
Yeah.
It is the result of decades of neglect from Conservatives and Liberals towards First Nations. So will the Prime Minister...
Liberals have been in power for 20 years out of the past 30.
Language. Will he call off his lawyers, stop fighting Shamattawa and Tatasquak, and deliver clean water now?
Hear, hear.
Pierre will deliver clean drinking water.
The Honourable Minister for
Indigenous elections.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just met with the Chief from Tatasquak just a few hours ago, and we talked about the importance of Bill C-61, the work that Tatasquak and the other communities have done on this legislation to ensure that we never go back to a time where well over 145 communities were suffering through long-term boil water advisories. That's the work that this government will continue to do in partnership with First Nations leaders, and I hope that the NDP will see that this is important legislation that needs to get through this House and that will have their full support.
Yeah, what a bullshit answer, man. These people are disgusting.
Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Climate change is an issue that affects us all, and small businesses are not immune to the devastating effects of a changing climate.
Damn it!
Businesses in my riding,
damn it, Lee or Leia,
like Windfall Ecology, have been contributing to the fight against climate change. I
gotta say,
provide the Price on Pollution program, and so much more.
That's a nice scarf.
Can the Minister of Small Business tell Canadians about the measures the government has put in place to help all?
I don't like to say it. I don't like to give the Liberals or the NDP compliments.
And the fight against it.
But that's a nice scarf. It's got the Canadian flag on it.
Businesses.
And we've been so programmed to all of the Ukrainian
entrepreneur myself. I
merch, Ukrainian pins,
which is why
all of the kofeyes, whatever the hell they're called, the Palestinian stuff.
1,000 small and medium-sized.
At least she's wearing
by the end of the year through the Canada Carbon
a Canadian scarf
rebate. And as I mentioned already, we've negotiated agreements with both Visa and MasterCard to reduce their interchange fees by up to 27%. This is real, tangible difference that's going to help small businesses across this country. So we're going to continue to fight climate change while supporting small businesses. And happy Small Business Month, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, in the $400 million corruption scandal, which is the Green Slush Fund, you, Mr. Speaker, ruled that the Canadian people have the absolute right to demand the unredacted production of documents be given to the police. But this government refuses Parliament's absolute authority. Parliament is the people, and the absolute authority of Parliament is like your mom checking your room after you said you cleaned it. You know, you might be able to hide one or two things, and the government may be able to think they get off the hook, but Parliament is there to inspect and clean the House. Mr. Speaker, this is a messy House. When will this government clean it?
The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Great job, Ryan. Speaker, as I've said, the government has handed over thousands of pages of documents. However, the big issue here that I think Canadians are concerned about is that they know politicians shouldn't be directing police.
Exactly.
And what is at issue here is the fact that this House has decided that they are judge and jury and that the police should investigate something. We have no problem.
Stop blocking things at committee.
In fact, of course, any government would respond to them. And I would expect that any government of any stripe would react the same way we are today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, the police have already opened an investigation. This is just Parliament asking for documents to be turned over. It's the ask and the absolute rule of Parliament, and this government's refusing. Just think of it like a business, right? This government forgets that in a business, they're the employee. The Canadian public are the owners. In the real world, if a business refuses or employees refuse to hand over documents or hand over anything in investigation, those employees will be fired. Mr. Speaker, is this government just waiting to be fired by the Canadian public, or will they hand over the documents?
The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
That's very well said.
Mr. Speaker, in the real world, police have to request warrants. They have to go through due process to get information. It's not up to parliamentarians and politicians to direct police because they have a political vendetta. Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect due process, and they expect that politicians are here to protect their rights, not to get rid of their rights.
Conservatives aren't getting rid of any of our rights.
South Shore, St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is so much Liberal corruption that Liberals are covering up their cover-up of the $400 million of corruption at the Liberal Green Slush Fund. The Speaker ruled that the NDP Liberals violated the House order to turn the Green Slush Fund documents over to the RCMP criminal investigation. Obstruction of justice is the Liberals' middle name. They refused to turn over documents in the SNC scandal, in the We Charity scandal, in the Winnipeg Lab scandal, in the foreign interference scandal. Just end the corruption cover-up and turn the documents over to the RCMP. How bad is it?
That's exactly right.
Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, every Canadian watching right now wants parliamentarians to do their job. The job of the opposition is to hold the government to account. The job of the opposition is not to direct the police. You don't need to take my word for it, Mr. Speaker. How about we hear from the Commissioner of the RCMP himself, who said that, quote, there is a significant risk that the motion could be interpreted as a circumvention of normal investigative processes and charter protections. He went on, in a free and democratic society, this ensures that the government cannot direct or influence the actions of law enforcement. We agree with the RCMP. It's time these guys start listening to the cops.
The honourable member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
The Liberals blacked out so much in the documents that the Prime Minister's office ran out of toner for their copiers. So apparently it's okay to turn blacked out documents that hide Liberal corruption over to the RCMP. That's not a constitutional issue.
Blacked out by blackface.
Issue to remove the redactions and expose the Liberal corruption. News for this minister, the Constitution does not exist to protect Liberals from criminal investigation. So will they just stop their cover-up addiction, and hand the unedited documents over to the RCMP?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
I have some grave concerns with what the member opposite said, beginning with the fact that I assume he's actually not seen those documents, so I'm not sure what he's talking about there, because the documents have been handed over. But what's of greater concern, and it was the RCMP who said it themselves, is that the way that the Conservatives are acting would actually compromise any police investigation, because the evidence would not be considered. So what is of concern is that they're interfering in an investigation, they're interfering in police independence, and Canadians should be rightly concerned that Conservative politicians want to direct the police. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Nope. You've left them no choice.
The Honourable
They've tried to deal with it in Parliament.
Sometimes it seems like the Liberals are doing their best to be disliked. 79% of Quebecers and Canadians are calling for an increase in OAS for seniors aged 65 to 74. 79% support. You know, it's hard to be more popular than that. All seniors are asking that they stop being divided into two classes of citizens. And people of all ages are calling for this, even some of the youngest. Even the House stopped bickering for 2 minutes to call for it. The Liberals are all alone on this. Why are they so keen to deny income to 1 million Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, it's very interesting to hear my colleague talk about seniors aged 65 to 74 when we know that member and her party, the Bloc Québécois, acted together with the Conservatives to oppose the lowering of the retirement age from 67 to 65. Today, they're talking about 65 years, but not too long ago, Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois wanted people to retire at 67. The Honourable Member for Shefford. Honestly, you have to wonder why the Liberals want a fourth mandate when their vision for the future of society seems to be to deny income to 1 million Quebec seniors. They're completely disconnected, and people can see it. And we've been very clear, the Liberals have until October 29th to pass C-319 and increase pension for seniors aged 65 to 74. Time's going quickly, especially since the Senate doesn't seem to be in any hurry these days. Why is it so important for the Liberals to go to the polls over this lack of consideration for seniors? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, we could put more credibility into the words of the Sovereignist Party across the way if they hadn't openly acted aggressively to oppose hundreds and hundreds of dollars in dental care for each and every senior who needs it, not just in Quebec, but across Canada. Including, Mr. Speaker, 14,000 seniors in her own riding. Mr. Speaker, there's no coherence here. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, you decided that the NDP Liberal government violated an order of this House by refusing to provide evidence to the police for a criminal investigation into this $400 million Liberal scandal. Mr. Speaker, The Liberals' refusal to provide these documents is an insult to the intelligence of Canadians. Will the Liberals stop playing hide-and-seek, provide the evidence to the police so that Parliament can do its work with transparency, and get back to work for all Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I think that Canadians should be truly concerned by this, because what we're seeing today and what we've seen in recent days, Mr. Speaker, is very concerning. The Conservative Party wants to direct the police, Mr. Speaker. Imagine in what state we would be if the Conservative Party, with the Conservative leader, imagine this, wanted to direct the work of the RCMP, Mr. Speaker. The RCMP has been very clear. There's an important risk that the motion be seen as a way of getting around charter rights and due process. We are going to fight to preserve democracy. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are facing really tough times, but times have never been better for well-connected Liberal buddies. The Auditor General has shown major discrepancies at SDTC when it comes to funding small and medium-sized businesses. The noble goals of SDTC were tainted when its $1 billion budget was repurposed so that a certain few could line their pockets. Mr. Speaker, will the Liberals finally give Canadians the transparency that they deserve?
That's all we want is transparency.
Innovation. Mr. Speaker,
in any government.
People who are watching us at home and those who are in the galleries today understand the Conservatives' games very well. The game the Conservatives are playing, Mr. Speaker, is to try to direct police in Canada. Imagine where that'll lead us, Mr. Speaker. I challenge my colleague. 87% of the businesses in clean tech in Canada got funding from SDTC, Mr. Speaker. The truth is that this is a foundation that helped small businesses across the country. And I think, Mr. Speaker, the day that we let the Conservatives direct the work of the police, it would be a very concerning day for all of us. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, the House is paralysed because of another Liberal corruption scandal. It must be in their DNA. $400 million, 186 conflicts of interest at a time when Canadians can barely afford to feed, heat, and house themselves. But Liberal donors continue to line their pockets, and the Liberals are continuing to protect themselves and their buddies by hiding the documents. When will the government give the police the documents that they need and get back the $400 million of taxpayers' money that's disappeared? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, what we've seen over the last few days is concerning for all Canadians. The reality of what we're seeing in the House is that the Conservatives are now trying to direct police services in this country. Mr. Speaker, in the history of Canada, what the Conservatives are trying to do is unprecedented. On this side of the House, we act responsibly. We have already provided the documents to the police, Mr. Speaker. There's been an Auditor General investigation. Documents have been provided, but what the Conservatives are trying to do
it's all redacted.
Is put a stain on democracy and prevent this House from working in the interest of all Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Bonavista, Burin, Trinity.
Mr. Speaker, our government is taking real action to tackle the most pressing issues facing Canadians, and this includes climate change. Canadians know that climate change is making life more difficult and more expensive. We are a government that understands that the realities of rural Canadians differ from those of Canadians living in larger urban areas. Can the Minister of Indigenous Services and FedNor please tell Canadians how our government is supporting rural and remote communities right across the country?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services and FedNor.
Mr. Speaker, as the Minister of FedNor and Indigenous Services Canada, I hear firsthand from rural communities hit hard by climate change. In fact, just yesterday, we heard from chiefs from Northwest Territories talk about the most severe drought they've ever seen in their lifetime. In fact, it's putting their livelihoods, their ability to gather food, their ability to get goods up and down that river at risk, Mr. Speaker. They know, and so many Canadians know, we must do more to protect the climate and each other. Conservative MPs don't care about that, though. They don't even believe in climate change, and they don't really care.
She believes everything she's saying so much that she needs to read it word for word.
$180 for people in the member.
The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday at the public inquiry, the Chief of Staff to the then Public Safety Minister was unwilling to explain why a CSIS warrant sat on the minister's desk for 54 days, when, according to national security officials, such a warrant is typically signed off between 4 and 10 days. It has been reported that the subject of the warrant is a former Ontario Liberal cabinet minister. Does the minister really expect Canadians to believe that this 54-day delay had nothing to do with the partisan interests of a Liberal Party?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, it's ironic that the member opposite talks about political interest, because it was the Conservative leader, when he was the Minister of Democratic Institutions, said he wasn't going to take foreign interference seriously because it wasn't in his political interest to do so. On the other hand, on our side, this side of the House, we have taken the issues around foreign interference seriously since day one, including ensuring that we have protecting our democratic institutions, including the current study to look into Russian-based influencers operating in Canada that Conservatives want to block.
The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Speaker, there is no other plausible explanation for the delay. It was about Liberals protecting Liberals. The Attorney General is responsible for seeing that Cabinet upholds the independent and non-partisan principles of our justice system. His Cabinet colleague put the partisan interests of the Liberal Party ahead of the administration of justice. What does the Attorney General have to say about that?
Hear, 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 hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Conservatives are going hard today.
Public safety.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to foreign interference, this is not a new phenomenon, but what is new to Canadians is a government that actually takes it seriously. That is precisely why we have implemented a number of measures to ensure that our democratic institutions are strengthened, to ensure that it's not at the whim of the leader of the opposition when he thinks there's some sort of political advantage to him. Mr. Speaker, we will take the issues around foreign interference, no matter where they are coming from, incredibly seriously, and not cherry pick like the Conservatives do.
What are you talking about?
The honourable member from Calgary Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, Iranian-backed Houthis shoot down civilian merchant ships. They fire missile after missile at innocent Israelis. They disrupt international trade. They traffic in violence and fear across the Middle East. These terrorists can freely operate, fundraise, and recruit in Canada. The Americans banned them in January. NDP Liberals said they'd think about it. It's been 10 months. Ban the terrorists. Protect Canadians. What's there to think about?
Hey, man.
The Honourable Parliamentary
There you go.
to the Minister.
But Canada harbors terrorists.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see that Conservatives want to play games with
voice,
incredibly serious issues.
Nails
we
on
on
a
this side of the
chalkboard.
House will not. What we will do, Mr. Speaker, is we will ensure that the national security agencies in this country who make regular terrorist listing determinations, that they have the resources they need to do just that. These national security organizations in Canada are constantly reviewing the terrorist listing, and the Minister of Public Safety has ensured that he is put forward for urgent review.
The honourable member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, it's a World Mental Health Day. This year's theme is time to prioritize mental health in the workplace. It reminds us that we need to prioritize mental health in all of our workplaces and communities right across the country. Everyone deserves to have access to mental health services that they need.
If you want to keep your innocence, don't look at the chat for the next 60 seconds.
What our government is doing to extend access to mental health services across Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for all of her advocacy on mental health. It's such an important issue to Canadians. Today is World Mental Health Day, a day to raise awareness and commit to breaking the stigma around mental health. Mental health is health, Mr. Speaker, and we're committed to expanding access to mental health services for all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we're taking action. While our government has solutions, the opposition only has slogans. From our government's work to creating a youth mental health fund to the 988 suicide helpline, we're taking a compassionate approach to make sure no one is left behind.
Hear, hear. The honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, here are today's headlines. Israeli troops opened fire on UN peacekeepers in Lebanon. Hundreds of thousands of people are trapped in northern Gaza, ordered to flee with nowhere to go. Israel is planning to shut down UNRWA, and Canada's leader of the opposition says that Israel bombing a nuclear facility would be a gift to humanity. This is crazy. This is enough. Canada needs to do everything to de-escalate, everything to build peace. We need to sanction Netanyahu, we need to have an arms embargo, and we need to recognize Palestine.
So why don't you go live in Palestine? What the hell, man? It's just like clockwork. The NDP just opposes.
Since October 7th, Canadians
logic.
Clear that
I don't know.
Expect us to defend Israel's security and get the hostages released, ensure international rules are
How about we focus on Canadian issues?
everything we can for civilians to be protected and make sure that this conflict doesn't spread into a regional or international crisis. Too many innocent civilians, including children and women, have been killed in this war. The loss of innocent lives is something we have not heard Conservatives talk about in this House, and I appreciate the NDP bringing it forward. This should not be controversial, Mr. Speaker.
Why do you have to read off your paper instead of speaking from the heart?
Center.
Mr. Speaker, back in April, 6 nations of the Grand River had to close their community.
Who burped?
Because of worsening black mold, first detected over a year.
It wasn't me.
And while Indigenous Services Canada has a responsibility to ensure 6 nations has a safe and accessible medical facility that meets their needs, the minister recently communicated to the community that they need to apply for funding and hope for the best. Will the minister take responsibility, commit to a follow-up meeting with 6 Nations Chief Hill, and expedite a new health center?
I swear, like the translator or someone down on the floor who's hot micing just belched.
Speaker, I will always commit to working with
First
Nations leaders on their infrastructure priorities. As the member opposite knows, there is a $380 billion gap in infrastructure left after generation of neglect of First Nations communities. But we have increased spending on First Nations infrastructure priorities by 1,800%, Mr. Speaker. And we're going to continue to do that work. We're going to continue to be there as partners, as communities build up the infrastructure they need for today and tomorrow.
That's the end.
And so brings to an end.
Yeah. All right. So actually, let's keep it running and see what goes on here.
Today and tomorrow.
They probably got a point of order or something.
Done this on Thursday afternoon. That is the Thursday question.
Weekly
I think
statement.
many Canadians are watching this. It's been 2 weeks today since your ruling that the Liberal government has been found in contempt of Parliament for refusing to turn over all documents pertaining to the $400 million Green Slush Fund. They have grinded Parliament to a halt by refusing to adhere to the will of Parliament and to your ruling. So we are watching with interest as they project the calendar for the next several sitting days, although we have a recess next week. Canadians want to know, perhaps in the last couple of hours, the Liberals have come to the sense and realized that they should provide and agree to provide the RCMP with full, unredacted access of all documents as ordered by Parliament so we can get back to business. Have they finally agreed to get back to work and get the RCMP the information they deserve to have?
Oh, there you go.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, here we are again. You'll remember at this time last week, I stood in this place and listed the following business for the upcoming week, specifically Bills C-71 on citizenship, C-66 on military justice, C-63 on online harms, and the Ways and Means motion related to capital gains. I'm sorry to say that all we have seen this week is more conservative procedural games. I can only imagine because they don't want to debate this important legislation because they're opposed to it for Canadians. And again, for a second week in a row, they have offered nothing constructive and instead have focused on bringing dysfunction to this chamber. And as I've said many times, Mr. Speaker, the government is supportive of your ruling and the Conservative motion, actually, to refer the privilege matter to the Standing Committee on Procedures and House Affairs. But why can't they take yes for an answer, Mr. Speaker? They are effectively spinning their own obstruction because they don't want this matter to be referred to committee. And the funniest part about it is not only did they amend their own motion, but today they amended their own amendment. So they are trying
so funny, Karina, you were right.
To avoid that this goes to committee for further study. And perhaps it's because what they will hear is expert after expert talking about the egregious abuse of power being displayed by the official opposition, their interference in police work, their obstruction of police investigation, and the fact that this is a complete disregard for democracy and the rights of Canadian citizens. They clearly don't want to debate government legislation. All they want to do is serve themselves and their own partisan interests. But, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to be here to work for Canadians, and let me take this opportunity, as I know Canadian families are going into this weekend, to be together, to give thanks for what they have, to wish all members in this House, as well as all Canadians, a very happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Mr.
So funny, Karina.
Colleagues, I wish to inform the House that the volume of earpieces will now be reset. Members using their earpiece at this time will...
All right, I'm going to read off some of the supers here.
I would like to inform the House that the volume of earpieces...
Jordan English with the 5 saying, look at that other liberal that makes me want to barf. Look at another liberal that makes me want to barf. I don't even know which one you're talking about, but it's pretty applicable to all of them. TP with the 279. Hit the like button, please. Why? You guys don't have to give super chats to say it, but thank you. I appreciate it, man. You guys are like the best chat, best community. I love this. I don't even have to say W's in the chat anymore. You guys do it yourselves. It's phenomenal.
A minute and 50 seconds left on the clock.
TP with the 279. Arrest that criminal.
I misspoke there. I thought that I had a 10-minute speech, Mr. Speaker. I think I'm splitting my time with one of my colleagues here, but perhaps not. So I'll speak on for 12 minutes here, unless I'm reminded otherwise. But I've gone through a very extensive illustration of exactly how the corruption that has been part of this government since I've been in this government, since I've been in this parliament for
Jordan English with the $2 saying no money out
but at the end
until our problems are fixed here.
Gone through
Dude,
again.
I agree full-heartedly. I'm actually going to pause this for a second. I was talking to a buddy of mine about this, about how much money we're spending. And you remember that the Calgary pipeline that burst? Or not the pipeline, the water pipe that burst in the summertime? Does anyone know how much money that took to fix? Water pipe burst. I don't remember how much money that took to fix, but I feel like it was in the millions of dollars, right? And it put a city, Calgary, on like a very reduced amount of water advisory for like weeks. Our infrastructure in Canada, all of our water pipes that were put in this house, in my town, in the next one, all in the cities, they were put in like 90 years, 100 plus years ago. And you're seeing more and more again. The Calgary one was massive, and it made obviously national news because it's a big populated area. But all of the, like, this is happening in towns all across Canada where the water pipes are bursting. And that's because the copper is eroding. It's rubbing against gravel or rocks down below, and it's time to replace it. We need to spend, I did some rough calculations as best as I could, because we're getting into the amount of zeros that it's hard to like comprehend. But in order for us to fix our infrastructure, just our water, for all of our housing, all of our apartments, our condos, everything from province to province, territories to territories, it would cost likely over close to $1 trillion in Canada. If we were to just snap our fingers and get it done right now, that's a lot of money, and that's just our water, right? To fix it for everybody to renew it, because we have to do it. Imagine if Toronto's main water line burst, the millions of people that would have to go without water, right? That would be insane. And that's just water. That's not our power lines. That's not our roads. That's not our old buildings, our infrastructure. It's just the water. Like, Canada needs to spend billions, trillions of dollars fixing our shit. So the fact that we rushed to pay $25 million to Lebanon for humanitarian aid, dude, Canada looks the way it does now, and it's eroding. It's getting worse as time goes on. And other countries, we're helping them fix their problems. We need to work on our own stuff. This is why we got like China and Japan, all of these like more high-tech places. Dude, they're not sending trillions or billions of dollars to other countries to fix their problems. They're working on their own stuff. And Canada it might not affect you in your lifetime or me in my lifetime, right? And see the massive flip of Canada becoming a third world country, but it definitely could happen for our grandkids, our great grandkids at some point. We need to start spending our money here to fix our stuff, fix our water lines, fix our roads, fix our infrastructure. Like, this is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, man, that we're just shitting away money to other, like, yeah, okay, I understand the humanitarian aid aspect, but again, we got a drug crisis in Canada. Like, come on, let's fix that. Let's fix that. Let's fix our stuff here first. And you're a crazy person if you say this, right? You're like, what do they say? A white nationalist? Come on, man. That's ridiculous. Yeah. Sorry, I had to interrupt, but I just had to get that out there.
Paul Martin government that fell for that, and recognize it fell over a $4 million scandal. Now, $4 million is a
cryptic sense for the $699. More money to rich people, yes.
In 2004,
do keep exposing yourselves even more. Why don't you?
$1 scandal where it was proven
that the
government had actually given money to companies where money was being
Andrew with it too.
The Liberal Party. So
looks like it's the Minister of Education from Idiocracy. I don't even know which one you're talking about, but that's applicable to all of them. All the Liberals.
Atrocious. Canadians punished and sent them
Mr. Peachy with the 5. What will the Liberals do when Canadians feel the effects of the carbon tax being lifted by the Conservatives? Lose all credibility for decades? I currently think that
enough information.
The Liberals, it's going to take is it hard to hear me, by the way, with running this and then also talking? Let me know, chat. I can easily just pause it.
The way it should have. But I've spoken
or turn it down a little bit more. You guys let me know. I'm just trying to
scandals that have happened in this government.
Trying to please everybody here so people can kind of hear what's going on.
Talked about that. That was in 2018, and what that did was effectively tarnish Canada's reputation on the international stage because one of our
I feel like the Liberals
at the time, I think our largest engineering company was involved.
Their reputation is going to be stained for like
around the
years, man, 10, 15 years.
A lot of Canadian companies.
Audio's fine. All right, cool. I never know. I've got my settings set up so that you should be able to hear both.
That's a huge.
I know some people have a hard time with that.
Canadian companies could not participate in international bids from international organizations because of one bad apple that was in the pockets of this Liberal government. And how do I know that? I know that because at the end of the day, you had the Prime Minister more or less throwing one of his ministers.
We don't agree on everything.
In order to get what he wanted,
for the most part, we are on the same
deferred
page.
agreement with SNC-Lavalin and getting the Attorney General to acquiesce to that, which was completely and deemed to be and ruled to be.
You're never going to find somebody that you agree 100%.
Winnipeg Labs. Well, we know what
that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen with a celebrity. It's not going to happen with a politician. It's not going to happen with friends or family.
The consequences.
But obviously, the more common ground, usually the better, right? The less confrontational things can be.
From the leaks from the Winnipeg Lab. Incidentally, that was in 2000.
You can't hear me at all now.
When civil servant was at this bar in this house.
How's this?
Effectively saying, I've got some.
Greg Fergus muted me.
And your predecessor, Mr. Speaker, was ordering him. The government, what they did is they took your predecessor to court in order not to produce those documents.
I went too low.
Never been done
Yeah,
before
it should be
in
good now.
Where the government
We didn't hear you. All right.
representative of this parliament.
JJ with the 20 said, Jasper, my last name is Jaster, no joke. We don't agree on everything, but I think that for the most part, we are on the same page. I want to thank you for your channels and wish you and your family health and wealth. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And again, to reiterate what I said when apparently I was too low to hear, you're never going to find somebody that you agree with 100%, whether that's a celebrity, whether that's a family, a friend, whether that's a politician. The more things you have in common, usually the better. But yeah, I appreciate that nonetheless. Joe Uber with the 10. Go steady, sir. He said, Stinky Karina Gould. Jordan English with a 5. So if the speaker that made the ruling is right there, why the hell can't he just be like, yeah, I meant take all those documents and hand them in now?
Have to disclose what had happened and what they were complicit in allowing to happen.
I mean, in a perfect world, that would happen. In a very much, I'm just going to mute this guy. It's driving me a little nuts. In a perfect world, that would happen. The thing about politics is that there's this really, really long and boring process. And things have to be done by the book. You can't move a pen across a table without leaving a paper trail when it comes to government, but specifically politics. And so that is extremely annoying. But yes, I agree that would be phenomenal if that did take place. Mr. Peachy says, strong men plant seeds that create trees we will never bask in the shade of. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Matthew with the 20 says, it is breaking the Charter of Rights of Canadians if you report me to the police, yet it's okay to take Canadians' Charter of Rights because they use their freedom to assemble in protest. Oh, dude. That's nail on the head right there, man. And that's kind of the irony about the whole thing is that, you know, they're saying they need to protect the rights and the freedom of expression and speech by, you know, from the Vancouver freaking Hamas supporter protests, right? They were saying death to Canadians, death to Israel, death to America, but it's freedom of speech. We have to protect their rights. Like, come on, that's a little nuts. Alrighty. Merrick with the 5, but no message attached. Thank you. And Alan says with the 2, he says, talk less while others are talking, please. Well, I'm sorry you don't like that, Alan. I definitely try to talk in between or after, but my settings are pretty good where when I talk, it does lower them a little bit. So you can definitely, I'm prioritized with this microphone. This is YouTube after all, and this is a commentary channel, but I can understand why you would want to only hear them. There is CPAC if you just wanted to hear that. But yeah, that's it is what it is, Alan. I'm sorry you don't like it. Sorry you don't like it. Folks, I think that's where we're going to... Joe, stop. Stop it, Joe. Gifted the 10 memberships. There you go, folks. Anyone who's looking for a member, claim them now before they all get snagged up. That's where we're going to end this. There's nothing else. There's been a lot of support on this stream. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody engaging. I appreciate the W's in the chat. I appreciate the subscribers. I appreciate the likes on the stream. Got like 1,300 likes. I see a lot of people in the comments now saying in the live chat saying it's good for the commentary, that they like it, that they, you know, that they don't go to CPAC because they prefer this in the community here. It's a balancing act for sure. It's a balancing act. You should try to be inclusive. I'll try to include you a little bit more, Alan. But it is what it is at the end of the day. It is what it is. How does one claim a gifted channel member? I'm not too sure, to be honest. I think you I think when someone gives some, you just got to like type in the chat. And if you have gifted enabled, you can claim it if there's still some available. I think that's how it works. I'm not sure. I've never gone through that side of the process. Folks, this is where we're going to end the stream. I appreciate everybody being here. I don't stream on Fridays, typically, unless something happens, unless there's a committee hearing. I probably won't be streaming tomorrow. And if I'm not mistaken, next week they're off. What month are we? October 14th. Yeah, they're off. Is that because Thanksgiving? Is it this weekend? The 14th. It's on Monday. Okay. Yeah. Well, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I did see that in the chat. Some people were saying, "What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" I think just hanging out with family, having turkey. I am going to a family gathering for Thanksgiving, and in our family group chat, people were wanting chicken instead of turkey, and I said, "That's illegal. We're not doing that." But no, I refuse. Yeah, but I think they settled on turkey because I put up a big stink about it. Peace and love, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you, William Joyce, with the $1 US super chat there. No message attached, but thank you nonetheless. Enjoy your weekend, guys. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I guess I won't be streaming until there's something worthy of streaming, whether it's a committee hearing or something going on. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope everyone enjoys Thanksgiving. I hope everyone gets the time off that they deserve and, the family time that they deserve. I love you all. Again, happy Thanksgiving. And I'll see you guys after the holidays. Wow. Yeah, I suppose so. Peace and love, everybody. Peace and love, everybody. And again, happy Thanksgiving. Damn it, Alan. You son of a gun. Alan with the 5 in reference to me talking while they're talking, which is fine. Just sometimes it's nice to follow what they are saying. Not saying I don't like the commentary. There you go, Alan. W's in the chat for Alan. Happy Thanksgiving, Alan. We love you. We appreciate you. Thanks for coming around. Alan just admitted that he wants me to talk over every single politician, every single stream moving forward. I will do that for you, Alan. I'm just kidding. Peace and love, everybody.